Welcome to the saperis live interviews where we talk to Google Workspace experts and also users. And today we're going to talk to a really interesting person, and it's going to be about the benefits of using Google Workspace. So I'm really happy and delighted. And let me get him on stage so you can meet him. Welcome, Rowan. Great to have you here.
Thank you, Chanel. It's a pleasure. Absolute pleasure.
So tell me, first of all, where are you located? Where you're joining from today? In which city do you live and work?
This is always a good topic of discussion because people are confused about me being in North America based on my accent. But I'm actually located in Toronto, in the fine city of Toronto in Canada now, but only since December last year. Before that, for my whole life, I lived in Scotland.
In Scotland. So, what is a Scottish man doing in Canada? How did you end up there?
That's a good question. That's a good question. Well, before I moved to Toronto and Canada and worked for SADA, I actually worked for another Google partner, but based in the UK called Cobry, and on the workspace deployment side. So I was leading our workspace deployment team. And I've helped hundreds of organizations in Europe move to and make the most of workspace. And through that, really developed over time, repeatedly saw the incredible change and transformation that Workspace can bring when an organization transitions from another legacy platform. And through that, developed a great love for the technology and also enabling the change as well within the technology in the organization. So because of all that passion, then it started to attract some attention of some of the larger workspace partners, and SADA was very attractive to me as a company, being that they're a kind of family business, and I like that aspect of it, but with the huge scale of opportunity in North America, and Google's footprint in North America is absolutely massive. So that kind of prompted me to move over and immigrate to Canada, and now I'm a workspace sales specialist for SADA. So actually helping convince organizations or helping organizations evaluate whether they should make the move to workspace instead of actually doing the change itself.
So, Google Workspace actually led you to another continent. That's really cool.
That's right. That's right. It's amazing. I actually have met so many incredible people like you and many of the other workspace experts and passionate people around the world virtually without ever meeting them. And it's incredible the amount of connections that you can make through the sort of love of the platform. There's so many different people that I've met and engaged with that are so passionate and excited about it.
And it's true because you are really passionate about Google Workspace. I love your LinkedIn posts. And, how did you first encounter Google Workspace? When was the first time? Was it love at first sight for you?
Yeah, this is a good question. So actually, before even thinking about organizations using Workspace, like many people, I actually encountered the Workspace tools initially through my education. So when I was at university, I did the typical thing of having to do a group project, and we worked before using the Google tools on, well, to be honest, the Microsoft Office suite. We worked on it locally on our machines, saved a copy, emailed it to each other. And I mean, we didn't know quite how problematic that workflow was at the time, but I remember it being pretty painful. Then I got introduced to Google Docs and my mind was blown immediately. So that was the first wow moment where people, my colleagues could work with me in a document in real time, no disruption. Every single version is saved. So you can roll back if anyone makes a mistake or you do something that you don't like. Allows completely seamless remote collaboration. So that was an immediate green light of incredible sort of light bulb moment of incredibleness. But then I actually moved more towards understanding how it could impact organizations when later on in university, I did a consultancy project with Colin Bryce, who's the owner of Cobry, the founder of Cobry, the Google partner that I worked with before. And through that work, I started to get more and more involved and learn more and more about the technology and Google's vision for what Workspace was and the disruptiveness of it. And I really latched on to that idea of change and transformation and the vision there. So That's when I sort of got involved in deploying Workspace more and more. And then I saw the impact firsthand. I saw people like be amazed like I was when I first saw Google Docs, but also people almost cry with emotion because of the relief that the Google Workspace technology brought compared to what they were doing before. So an incredible amount of emotion attached to some of the work that I've done, which really, again, made me, that's brought a lot of the passion. Seeing the impact the workspace actually has on people's day-to-day tasks can be incredible.
And did I understand this correctly? So you went from the university where you first came in touch with Google Workspace straight into an internship, I'm guessing, with Google Workspace. And then that's been your career choice ever since. Is that correct?
That's correct. That's correct. Exactly. So I started working with Colin, the founder of Cobri. I got more and more involved with him, supported him. And then I started really learning more of the technical path of Workspace. So I really dove into learning that, gaining certification, and then deploying it as much as possible for, as I said, hundreds of organizations. And through that, I really gained the experience, learned all the lessons that you only do through doing these things 100 times. And also, as well as the technical elements, done a whole bunch of change management initiatives. So training and transformation labs and things like that. Incredible types of activities where you're really engaging with people and trying to get them to understand the technology and how they can benefit from it. So got involved in both the technical and change management aspects and actually delivering that. And through that, that's how I gained the experience, knowledge, and passion that I have.
So, you touched upon a subject I think is very, very interesting, that Google has a version of Google Workspace for education, so for schools, for universities. And I personally think that's a very smart move because in your case, you experienced both worlds. So the way it used to be with, someone is writing a word and you're collaborating with three other people and you're sending different versions around and like, what's the latest version and, stuff like that. So you really, you lived through the pain of not having a real collaboration basis for what you were doing. And then you experienced Google Workspace. And what I'm guessing for the future, if more people like you come out of school, come out of university, and love the experience with Google Workspace, they're going to expect that from their employer as well. So I'm guessing, the war for talents, that this is going to put also some companies maybe a bit under pressure to at least start considering or also start using Google Workspace. Do you already see that happening, especially now in North America?
Yeah, absolutely. So many points to unpack here. So Google, of course, are the disruptor here, right? Microsoft were the original collaboration platform technology that allowed us to communicate and collaborate within business and somewhat extending that to education. Google came in with these capabilities like real-time collaboration, completely changed the game. So applying that to education also makes tons of sense. But previously, maybe a decade ago, 5 years ago, I remember having a lot of conversations with organizations who were very resistant to the change and thinking about Workspace because so many of their staff for 10, 15, 20 plus years had been using the Microsoft tools and become so embedded in that platform that the thought of even moving away was so painful, they weren't even willing to consider what could be unlocked with new possibilities. But now I hear more and more that conversation being younger people entering the workforce. Already, I think the impact of what you're describing has already hit the market and will continue to. But we hear more and more organizations saying that their younger people are almost revolting when they don't have the workspace tools because they've been used to these real-time capabilities where they can chat, jump in a video call quickly, and also type in a document together with no disruption. And so to go into an organization that's completely 5, 10 years behind that, sending files back and forth, and doesn't allow this capability is completely insane to them. They can't work like that at all. So we're hearing more and more the pressure from employees, I think quite rightly, for these capabilities that they know and love and used in education to also apply and they can use effectively for a business purpose too.
Yeah, what I also like about you said, that Google is the disruptor, and I think great things can come from a disruptor in an industry. It's so, for instance, Word, the original version of Word is a month older than I am. So it's 38 years old. And we've been using it ever since. And as you said, people know how to use it. Companies just use it because that's the default word processing tool that one has. But has it really evolved? Has it, no, it's the same, every couple of years there's a couple of new features, which is great, but it hasn't fundamentally changed. And that's what I like about it. A second player coming on stage like Google, who said from the beginning on, why should we install this on computers? Is that really necessary? Is that the way we want to work? And, just challenging the way that Microsoft did it. Not saying that Microsoft did everything wrong, definitely not. But I think it's good to have a challenger here. And now Microsoft might also come up with really cool new features that Google didn't think of. And I just think this back and forth is very important. Do you agree on that, or?
Could not agree more. Could not agree more. Actually, thinking back to the earlier days, just as we were discussing how I got into Workspace and my journey with Cobry, I remember having discussions with Colin, the founder of Cobry, and us discussing that his initial sort of reason, or one of the reasons that he started the company and really bought into the Google vision, is because of that disruptiveness and the frustration with the lack of innovation. You're talking about a decade where barely anything changes. You see small incremental features being added, but with the possibilities that moving to the cloud brought, that was completely ignored by Microsoft. And it took someone like Google to actually come in for them to take it seriously. I remember Colin mentioning that people used to laugh at him talking about the cloud, and that Workspace was actually a serious platform where you could, be efficient and work in a different way and collaborate in a different way. And now you see Microsoft, of course, react with Office 365 and embrace the cloud fully. And now are pushing that as their main platform for productivity. So
True, yeah.
I totally agree with you that it takes at least another player in the market to really push innovation. And I actually read that there was 230 new features added or updates added to Workspace alone in 2020. 230. That's incredible.
Wow.
So it's difficult for people like you and me who are experts and passionate about this to keep up, never mind the rest of the 3 billion active users that use the tools. So incredible. I love the fact that Google innovates so much. And I do think it's great for the market generally that they put pressure on Microsoft to keep up or compete with that innovation.
And it's great for me too, because it gives me new content for YouTube videos for this channel.
And my LinkedIn posts, of course.
And your cool LinkedIn post with the emojis. So another thing that I wanted to talk about is you mentioned that you moved last year, December, so that's December 2020. You moved to Canada. You're working for SADA as a Google Workspace Specialist. But that was in the middle of the pandemic. How were you onboarded?
That's right. A completely remote onboarding. So I had no physical contact whatsoever from any SADians at all, or Googlers, of course. I was sent my equipment, set it up, logged into my tools, and I started the onboarding process, which, to be fair, I think SADA had put a lot of effort in to evolving that into remote. And we actually used one of the workspace tools, Google Classroom, to do our onboarding. So there was different modules of content to read up on and videos to watch and work through, which there was sort of a module based for everyone joining SADA, no matter of your role. And then there was also a sales-focused course that I went through. So sort of personalized content based on what your role is and exactly where you are in the company. But that sort of led you through various different content sort of formally that you could work through at your own pace. But I'd also say that chat was instrumental, and what is, well, now Spaces, what was Rooms at the time, allowed me to get introduced to the team. There was no barrier whatsoever to messaging anyone instantly. And sure, you're not going to get reply, but you have the ability to do so. And I think the rooms that we had set up, or now Spaces, really helped me to get involved with the team, see what everyone else was doing, and keep visibility of what was going on. So that combination of Classroom and chat, as well, of course, Meet, allowing to see people and sort of speak with people and meet them, I think was pretty good for remote. But there was definitely some challenges for sure. I think meeting up with people would have definitely helped me get a closer connection. And I would say once I did get to meet up with some of my colleagues, we were able to develop a relationship and speak about things a lot more freely. So Yeah, there was certainly challenges for sure, but I think some of the workspace tools actually came in pretty handy for it.
hmm Yeah, I like how SADA really leveraged the different products within Google Workspace and even used Classroom. But it's true, it doesn't, it doesn't. We still need that contact, that one-on-one, getting to know each other. But it's good that at least you had these tools in Google Workspace that made it possible. But it's also good that you were able to meet them now, and you also have your own YouTube channel with oh, what's his name again? Tell me, Troy.
Yeah, so
Troy.
Troy
Yeah.
Edwards, and Troy was actually the first colleague that I met physically
Mhm.
after the remote onboarding. And once it was, there was the COVID situation, of course. So once it
Mhm.
was safe and that died down a little bit, me and Troy were able to meet up, and we made for on our first meeting alone, we made more progress than we had in all the calls we've been in. I actually realized he was a pretty cool guy, had some funny jokes. He made
Yeah.
fun of me a lot, which was good. So I agree. I think it's one of the biggest challenges that organizations are going to face in the next 5 to 10 years. How do we make remote working as connected as possible? How do we
Mhm.
replicate that, but virtually? And I agree with you that certainly at the moment, I don't think in-person connection cannot be replaced in any way. But I think it'd be interesting to see how organizations are going to move closer and closer to that. Perhaps
Mhm.
they'll never be able to replicate it, but how close can we get? And how effectively can we work remotely without ever meeting colleagues?
Yeah, true. So, and who knows what for new cool apps will be launched within Google Workspace that will give us a bit more of that experience. Um, so I like your title, Google Workspace Specialist. But walk me through a typical day. What does that mean? What do you do with your potential or with your customers?
Totally, absolutely. So my job is in sort of the pre-sales stage of Workspace. You could think of them in the Workspace sort of sales cycle or customer journey, three different stages. There's the part where maybe you haven't moved to Workspace yet and you're evaluating it. Then there's the part where you actually deploy and migrate your data from another system into Workspace. And then there's ongoing sort of adoption, and you want to keep sort of doing change management initiatives and make the most of the platform. So I'm involved in that first stage primarily, that part where organizations are evaluating moving to Workspace. And that's where a lot of this sort of evangelism that I try and have and passion
Mhm.
comes in, because these companies have not necessarily been exposed to the magic of Google, which me and you and lots of our people love. But if you haven't seen it or experienced it or touched it yet, then you don't know that world at all. So a lot of my job involves speaking with customers or prospects, organizations that are considering making the move or haven't even heard of Workspace yet, showing them what the tools could do for their organization. And we often do this activity where we call it the mutual evaluation process, where we actually partner with an organization and walk them through stage by stage how you evaluate a different productivity platform. And in this case, it's Workspace. And that involves technical aspects, involves evaluating with your people and seeing if they'll accept the technology. And also are things like engaging with your executives and highest level people in your organization to make sure that they're also bought into the change too. So all of those stages help an organization actually effectively evaluate if they're going to be able to move to Workspace or not. And that's an activity that I'm involved in.
How is the reception now in this evaluation phase from the employees? What is like, I would say, how do the majority of the employees react to this being evaluated and, the possibility of migrating to Google Workspace?
Yeah, absolutely. I think there can be a whole range of reactions from the perhaps younger people that have entered the workforce and older folks too, not excluding them at all, but just typically from education, these folks have used the workspace tools. So perhaps that group that have used the tools in another capacity or in their personal or education life, they can be incredibly excited, over the moon, ready to leave behind perhaps archaic technology and processes that they don't want to work with. So there's that group, but there can also, of course, be a group of people who are, and I think the natural position maybe as a human being is to be kind of resistant to change. You're used to your own world, you're comfortable in that, and you're perhaps a little anxious about the change. And that's where our role as a partner for Google, it comes in so heavily because we need to show the organization and prove to them that their people are not going to revolt to the tools, because one, we're going to help them with their change management and make sure they have training and their people are supported. But also we can prove to them with an activity we call a day in the life, where we give people in the organization the tools to try out in particular scenarios in a completely sandbox demo environment. So it's not affecting any of their real work. They use the workspace tools in this very selective way, and we show and prove through that people will be able to use the tools and perhaps even benefit and be able to work more efficiently. And we survey people at the end of that process or that little trial period, and the results from that are usually very positive. People seeing the impact that the tools could have once they actually use them out and see a process maybe that they used to do replicated or improved with Workspace, then they relax a lot. And they also see, of course, that SADA is there to support them, and we'll walk them through it all and make sure they're comfortable too. So there definitely can be a lot of anxiety, but we do that sort of activity to prove to the people and the organization at the highest level, the business case, that people are going to be able to adopt the technology in it, and it won't be a disaster.
I think that's a very smart move with given this sandbox environment. It's like, here you go. This would be the scenario. Try it out. And, it convinces them. So I think that's really cool. And you know what? We have a question. Let me go ahead and add this. So Julio is asking, hi guys, currently my startup uses Workspace, but we hate how unorganized chat and threads can be. Do you have any tips on that? And he then has a follow-up question. Let me just go ahead and add that too. We're thinking about using a different chat app, but I would love for us to stay within Workspace. So what are your thoughts on that, Rowan?
Yeah, absolutely. A few different layers to unpack here for sure. I think Google are clearly focusing very heavily on messaging within chat. You can see that with the evolution of rooms into spaces. And I think that we're only at the start of that story. I think Google are going to add features along the timeline of the next few months and years that are going to improve that experience further and accommodate perhaps larger audiences and things like moderation within chat to allow maybe a little more control for some of the problems or challenges that you're mentioning, which is how do you keep up with the different topics? How do you keep up with all these rooms sprawling or spaces sprawling all over the place? So I think some of those things I'm mentioning that Google are going to introduce, like the administrative sort of level of control versus just someone contributing to the chat, will allow a bit more moderation, perhaps. I also know that coming down the line, Google are adding inline topic threading. So you'll be able to take someone's individual message and sort of split that off and have a conversation around that without disrupting the main thread of the chat or any other conversations going in within that space. So some of these nuanced features that allow chat to be sort of separated a little and split off, I think will help. Definitely would encourage the use of spaces instead of maybe group. I think that allows for a few more features, and actually very handily you can convert a group into a space, which is amazing. So if you have a group set up, people in your organization, and you want to add external people, perhaps you can convert to a space and then just tick the box to allow external people and add them in too. So I don't know. I feel like Google are really adding a lot of flexibility here and features that are making the meshing experience a lot richer. I don't know specifically maybe what the individual problems are that you have, but I think Google will continue to develop features that are going to help you. And yeah, maybe just work on people using spaces effectively, splitting off the threads for now, and some of those moderation features will help, and inline topic threading too, coming down the line.
Yeah, and I personally really like how Google, keeps up with. I have the feeling with requests from the users, so they give us now the option to have threaded spaces or not. That wasn't available beforehand. You couldn't choose. So I like how they adapt, how they listen to what the people say. But I think what Julio is also touching on is something. I'm guessing that the messaging app that they might want to switch to is Slack. I mean, Slack is everywhere. I used it too when working in startups, and as a developer, that's what we relied upon. And I personally also think that it's okay that Google Chat isn't a one-to-one copy of Slack. It's its own product. Google has their own agenda, especially with the whole spaces and that you can like work on documents now within a space. All of this, I have the feeling they're bringing this to a place. We don't see it yet, but it's going to be interesting. And that's something Slack won't be able to do. But yeah, I think that it's just not it's not an exact alternative. And I personally, I mean, we're a startup too, and I try to keep our costs low. So I don't want a lot of different licenses. I'd rather just pay for Google Workspace license and have a lot of good tools, even if Slack might be stronger with certain features. But I'm just, too cost aware to say we'll buy all of the tools out there. That's okay. If Google Workspace already does, in my opinion, a good job with messaging. I'm sure, Rowan, that's something your customers also do when they're evaluating Google Workspace is, okay, it's going to obviously cost money. What can we get rid of when we use Workspace?
This absolutely. This is one of the most common discussions that we're having with organizations in calls involving an evaluation of Google Workspace is,
Mhm.
and even organizations using Google Workspace too. But just to focus on organizations that haven't moved yet, thinking about evaluating their entire environment for productivity, all of the different communication and collaboration tools that they can be using, which tends to be, sure, they have the Microsoft main platform, but then as you're sort of alluding to, they have all of these additional products, which may have some premium features and really very high-end features that some people in organization will use. But what we find is the capabilities, 90% of the capabilities of these tools are also available within Google Workspace. So one of the most sort of common discussions that we're having with organizations is add up all of these costs for the Microsoft platform that you use and all of the messaging, video calling, security, data loss prevention, email filtering. Like there's so many different products and tools. I counted up the number the other day of different individual areas that Workspace provides. I believe it's 20, 25, 30, something in that region. So if you look at how many tools an organization is paying for today, compare that to the cost of Workspace, it's night and day. So you really have to be thinking as an organization, how much am I going to let that tiny set of features, which maybe a few people use, hold me back from saving all of this cost potentially by consolidating under one platform? And that's definitely something that we're getting into with a lot of organizations for sure.
Yeah, and that also leads to a topic that is maybe a little bit sensitive, but the price increase with Google Workspace recently. I've been hearing that some organizations didn't really like that and are considering going back to Microsoft. But if you only compare, okay, Microsoft Office or Office 365 and Workspace, are you getting the whole picture? Because you probably have to use a couple of tools more, and that is going to add up to the costs again. So that's why I love that you say, if you're considering moving to Google Workspace, write down what for tools do you use, how much do they cost, and which ones will then be replaced by Google Workspace. That will give you a whole picture. And by the way, I think I got it right with guessing that it was Slack. And yes, it's true, Julia. I do also think, especially for startups, or if you just, are very cost sensitive, it's a good thing to do the math correctly and don't just jump over to and start using another app just because it has, one or two cooler features, or might just have the stronger brand or name, or people are just used to using it. Definitely. Talking about Office 365. So I know you've done migrations from Office 365 to Workspace. Have you ever discussed with customers who wanted to move back?
Well, we've certainly discussed some of the challenges or impacts that they might expect as a result of that change. I think some of the biggest things usually involve perhaps the live collaboration experience within files, which really isn't, whilst there's elements of editing sort of in real time within the Microsoft environment, I certainly don't think that it's just nearly as slick as what Google offers. And I think that it's fairly painful sometimes for people and organizations and teams to move from that agile, fast, everyone in a document together way of working, sort of almost back in time a little bit to the Microsoft real-time editing possibilities. Or what I see people more frequently do when they move to Office 365, honestly, is continue their same practice of working on a file locally and emailing it or sharing it with someone, and not actually taking advantage of the benefits of what the cloud brings, which is that you can do things like real-time editing. So
Mhm.
particularly that capability, we often see a lot of trepidation from people in organizations that are considering that move.
Yeah. And it's interesting because I was talking to someone who's been a Google Workspace users for a year now or years now, and they've been acquired by a company that also uses Office 365. And he was telling me, I tried out the online editors and certain features, it says download the computer version, so install it on your computer. And that's like, that's not how it's supposed to be. If you already have an online editor, then you should be able to do all of the features within there. And I think that's where you notice the difference that Microsoft is moving from traditional, it's installed on the computer, and we're slowly moving to the cloud. And Google just has this advantage that they started in the cloud from the beginning on. So I think that's definitely something to consider. If you're not sure, should I use Office 365 or Google Workspace, even though Microsoft does say, hey, we're in the cloud, they're not there yet 100%. They're on the way, but they're not there 100%. At least that's how I would describe it. Rowan, what are your thoughts?
I agree. I agree. It's totally indicative of the fact that they, were the traditional provider, started with on-premise technology because that was the thing. And then once the cloud came in, Google have only ever been on the cloud. That's where they were built on from day one. So they don't have this legacy technology that they then need to sort of adapt to the cloud. It was already built in that way. And that's why it all works seamlessly, doesn't break, has this incredible reliability, and also has security that's appropriate for the cloud built from day one as well, which I think is a huge thing that people don't often discuss. The idea of no trust or zero trust and beyond corp, these kind of ideas of access control is so complicated oftentimes in the
Mhm.
Microsoft world and so difficult to manage and sprawling compared to neat solutions that are cloud-based from day one like that.
Yeah. And you just mentioned something interesting because if we think of startups or just SMEs, they might not have a security expert on board. And I have the feeling that, with Google Workspace, it's just secure. You don't need that security specialist taking care of all of this. Is that also something you discuss with your customers, the benefits of security?
Absolutely. And you totally nailed it with your statement there. The real beauty of using Google Workspace as an organization in terms of security is that you get to take advantage of the immense scale of Google's security and network. Largest private network in the world.
Hmm.
Company spends hundreds of millions of dollars every year on it. And your one person organization can take advantage of that network and those protections if you want to. And that scales up all the way to the enterprise, of course. But it's incredible that any organization of any scale can take advantage of those protections and those capabilities. And some of the things that Google has built into the enterprise tiers of Workspace in terms of security, being able to use the investigation tool to dive into any user activity and take remedial action on that, absolutely outstanding. Again, that allows the scalability of a smaller company, maybe with one IT dedicated person, or it's even just part of their job, not even their full-time role. It allows them to actually effectively manage security at
Hmm.
any scale.
Yeah. Yeah. Really can agree to that. By the way, another comment came in. Someone who dared to move from Microsoft to Google and also says collaborating with Google is much easier and also collaborating with third parties with the Google tools. So yeah, I think the collaboration, that's the game changer. Something that is new to a lot of people. And I honestly, so I had this real life event last year. So I was helping out a customer of mine, all Microsoft, and I was doing an e-commerce project for them. I was just finishing up a project, and I literally remembered and experienced how it is to click on a document and have a pop up tell you, you can't work on this document because XYZ is currently in it. And at that moment, I was just like, oh, I'm so used to live collaboration in Google Workspace. I've forgotten about this pop up. And that's why I totally agree with this comment that came in. Collaboration it's no comparison to Microsoft. And I'm sure you agree with that too, Rowan.
Yeah, absolutely. Google are continuing to double down on this. They changed the game initially, as we've discussed many times, allowing multiple people in a document at the same time. But I think they're even working on the next evolution of collaboration. The idea you mentioned earlier of bringing file editing directly into spaces in
Mm-hmm.
chat. So as you're messaging, you can see the context of a file and even work in it with your colleagues with the chat next to you. Outstanding. But even more than that, bringing a video call in Google Meet into a file, into the context of a file that you're working on. And me discussing the idea of the biggest challenge organizations face is how do we allow remote collaboration and the connectedness? How do we facilitate that with remote collaboration? The idea of bringing in a video call into a file that you're working on with other people so you can hear and see the people you're working with as you're typing away and doing work,
Mm-hmm.
that is a step absolutely in that direction.
Mm-hmm. And talking about video, something that, for a customer of mine, we've been discussing, or I've been hosting or moderating workshops about hybrid ways of working. And something that a lot of people, working from home, but also somewhere in the office, is they're noticing they're constantly in Google Meet. They're constantly meeting and discussing things because you don't have the option of saying, hey, let's grab a coffee together. I'll update you on this. No, there's a meeting for everything. And something I liked, which is not part of Google Workspace, but I hope it will become, is the Threaded app, where you can record something and send it to one or multiple people, because I think that would also be very fitting for how it is today. You don't necessarily need a meeting for that, a video conferencing call, but you might want to update or give feedback or something. As a matter of fact, I used that for an employee of mine that I gave him feedback. I sat in his first couple of training sessions he gave, and then I recorded the feedback. And I think that, again, is that the personal touch. It's not just me writing. It's not him having to block time to meet me in a call. It's me just sending out my message, and he can also reply like that. Have you tried that tool out?
I've not, but that's amazing. That's very much speaks to the same theme of that connectedness.
Mm-hmm.
And really the beauty of that tool or method is that you're able to do that at your own time. And that means not disrupting this sort of back-to-back calls that we have. You can do it at a time that doesn't disrupt you, but it still brings that element of connectedness. And of course, that's a lot more valuable than a message would be by any means. I'm sure your colleague appreciated that greatly. So
Yeah.
no, I would love to try that out. And I totally agree. For Google to integrate or bring that sort of capability into Workspace would be amazing.
So I hope it will become part, because it's from, I think they call it Area 120 or
Oh,
120. I'm not
okay.
sure. So from the Google Incubator, one of their apps. And I actually made a video about it. I tested it a couple of months ago. So I'm hoping that, if it gains traction, if they notice that people are using it, that they make it part of Google Workspaces. I think it would be a very smart addition. Obviously, you can do something similar. If you're in a Google Meet call, you just record yourself and then you share the recording. That would work too. But the other thing is, tailored especially for that recording, or also sales. Instead of, having a meeting
Hmm.
with a potential customer, you just record that, send it out. You can even record your screen. So, I see huge potential in adding that to Google Workspace. So if anyone from Google Workspace is watching, you know what I want.
Add that to the
So
list.
exactly. So Rowan, tell me a little bit about the difference. The Scotland, the UK region when it comes to Google Workspace. Well, the rate of adoption there. How is that different compared now to, I'm guessing, primarily Canada, but maybe also America?
Yeah, so for SADA, I help with organizations both in Canada and America as well, the US. And I think there is subtle differences between those markets for sure. I'd say definitely in the US, just because Google is based there and the culture of Google is very much kind of aligned with that country, I would say, or some of the values are for sure. So I'd say organizations in the US tend to be very receptive. They like the idea of Google being innovative, being a company that's moving forward, that's going to power them, to drive forward and innovate. I think actually the Canadian market, in some ways, in some funny ways, is similar to the UK market and being a little more a little more reserved, almost a little more wanting to adopt things slower, wanting to really understand and evaluate a change before moving. I find that our US counterparts are maybe a little more gung ho, and I would say to their credit a lot of the time, because they make change happen and make impact happen. But I'd say the Canadian and UK markets definitely adopt Workspace, and in the education sector, there's huge adoption, and in the business sector too. But I find the businesses definitely are a little more slower, more traditional, and will adopt the technology over time. But the US folks are really going all in and taking full advantage of the best technology that Google has to offer with Workspace.
hmm That's interesting how the culture of countries also has an impact on the technology they use.
Absolutely.
And that is something I see. So I'm currently at least still based in Switzerland. I've been the last 30 plus years. And I, first of all, when I tell my friends what I do, yeah, I have a company and I teach people how to use Google Workspace, and they're like, Google what? So they don't know that. If they're from a startup, or I would say also developers, a lot of them know that. There are some larger companies in Switzerland who have adopted Google Workspace, but it's still kind of like it's not out there for everyone to see and to know about. And something that we get a lot here in Switzerland, but I think in the whole DACH region, so German speaking region, is skepticism. It's like Google. Why would I give Google my data? I don't trust Google. How is that in Canada and in America? Is there also that like, ooh, Google? No, I don't trust them with my data.
Yeah, I would definitely say that there is that to an extent. I think that is changing though. I mean, you see Google from the very start, the honest story with Google with security is outstanding. They've made Workspace incredibly secure. And it's not like they've caught up or really added that security sort of late in the game. They always were strong there. They, for sure, more recent times have added enterprise level controls and security, and I see more of their focus there. But their story there is outstanding, and I think as a result of that, people are sort of they're not this untrustful of Google anymore, or being there's less of that for sure. And I think also if you look at one of the announcements from Next, for example, Work Safer,
Mhm.
massive security announcement. Google really showing end to end how a company can control different threats and have a security setup that's cloud based. So I think there is still some of that, but it's melting away with Google's real focus on enterprise level security. And companies
Mhm.
are really now starting to take that seriously and understanding that.
Yeah. So I'm actually new to the Google Workspace journey in the sense of specialized on it. It's been about 2 years now. Before, I just used it as a user myself in some startups and companies I've worked. But what I have noticed, and I don't know if it has to do with Mr. Soltero or not, but there is a form of professionalism. It's for me, it's like a real contender now against Microsoft. Before it was like, yeah, it's cool for startups and, for developers who anyway think differently a bit out of the box. But now I have the feeling it's really become this productivity suite where companies like Airbus, who, also have regulatory
Right.
things that they need to keep in mind of, say, we can't save our data there. That is our main tool. So I think there has been a lot going on in the Google Workspace scene, and you've been on board longer, so I'm sure you've seen the evolving of Google Workspace.
Yes, absolutely. Like I said, Google, you can see with their vision and the development of the features that they're really focusing on the enterprise level controls and meeting the compliance needs so more organizations can take advantage of Workspace, because that's actually sometimes what holds organizations back from using cloud-based tools like Workspace is some of these sort of stricter, maybe slightly, perhaps I say more archaic types of
Mhm.
compliance requirements. And you see Google now actually adding protections that allow organizations to use Workspace, like client-side encryption, like the ability to classify different files within Google Drive with sensitivity level and add that
Mhm.
to data loss prevention rules. Those kind of granular security features are really what enterprises need. And that's, you can see Google are now really bringing those features to the table.
Yeah. So that's really interesting. And let's see where the journey leads us in the future. I would like to start wrapping up. So here are three questions to end this discussion. Which is your favorite workspace tool and why? So you get to pick only one.
Oh goodness, that's so difficult. I have so many favorites. Let's see. Okay, I have to, without a doubt, go for the Jamboard. Jamboard
Mm.
is my absolute favorite. I think there's a lot of good tools within Workspace, of course, but the Jamboard has been unique to me as a way of adding ideas, throwing ideas together, creating concepts in a way that doesn't have any of the barriers of a Word document or a presentation. You can just go wild. And I know for some people, like my colleague Troy, that causes a little stress sometimes. He likes things to be more organized. But for me, to get my ideas and just immediately be able to throw them quickly onto a Jamboard is really fun and a great way for me to work personally. So I love that tool.
Mm-hmm. Cool. And I always use that in my training sessions. So I usually give virtual training sessions, and I usually have the people come into a Jamboard together and add their questions or expectations. And especially when you're doing that for a company migrating from, let's say, Microsoft to Google, it's a way for them to get to know the tool because they
Hmm.
might not know of it. It's not the first tool that comes to mind, and I think it has a great potential. So I totally agree on that, Rowan. Second last question. What is the most underrated app or feature in Google Workspace, in your opinion, and why?
Oh goodness, underrated. That is tough. Oh, there's again so many. So many. Okay, here's one that I would love people to use more. I do think some people use it, but I think if it was almost like soft enforced in meetings, that it would be amazing. The hand raising feature in Google Meet
Mhm.
sits there all the time, and yet I hear people interrupting each other in meetings
Yeah.
constantly. What I'd love to see, and I try and do personally, is when someone's talking, you have a point, raise the hand, allows them to finish their sentence. Like no one gets stressed. And with video calls, one of the things that's difficult to have an actual conversation is that there's a little lag. So if you interrupt
Mhm.
someone, it can be very disruptive. Whereas if you just raise hand quickly, then everyone's chill. And you can even queue up the hands as well. So you can go through
Mhm.
questions or points of discussion as well. So would love to see people using that feature more in
Yeah.
video calls.
Totally agree. Again, here I make a point of mentioning it at the beginning of training sessions. And maybe, as a meeting organizer or moderator, we should do that all the time, saying,
Mm,
hey, if you have a question, use the raise hand symbol, because it really does make a difference and it doesn't interrupt the flow. And especially if you're a moderator, it gives you the chance to say, hey, I'll come back to that question afterwards.
exactly.
By the way, we have former colleague of yours.
Hey, shout out to Victor. Yes.
And a second current colleague. Hi, Troy.
Shout out to Troy too. Amazing. All
Cool.
all all the people.
All the Google Workspace fans. So, last question. If there were one thing you could change about Google Workspace, what would it be? If
Oh
Google is
goodness.
listening, what would you tell them?
That's so difficult again. You're hitting me with all the hard questions. I don't know if this will ever happen, Chanel. I don't know if it'll ever happen. I don't know if it's technically possible. But in my dreams, I wish there was a way that the Google and Microsoft files were able to allow live collaboration with some people on Microsoft and some people on Google in a way that one side doesn't have to jump to the other platform.
Mhm.
Now, I
Yeah.
know this is probably never going to happen and it's probably technically possible, but in my dream world, I feel like that would allow everyone equally, no matter which platform you're on, to be able to live collaborate and work in real time, which for me is a joyful thing. But I don't know if
Okay.
that'll ever happen. I just dream that it would be possible.
Well, I hope that someone from Google Docs, Sheets, and Slides team is listening in and can write down that wish and maybe make it happen. And by the way, one of our viewers feels the same way about that. Awesome. So, Rowan, was awesome talking to you. Thank you for sharing your experience and your insight with us. And it was really nice getting to meet you because we've only actually had contact through chat and so on. And now it's the first time that we spoke kind of face to face. Who knows? Maybe we at Google Next in the future we get to bump into each other. I want to thank all of the viewers. Thank you for the comments, for the questions, and see you around soon. Bye bye.
Bye bye.